Today, I bring you the story of a model who dared to mock Pablo Escobar live on national television. Valentina Restrepo believed that her surname and her family's social status would be enough to keep her safe from the most feared drug lord in Colombia. But no one could have imagined what would happen next. Help us reach 300 likes. Subscribe, and let us know where in the world you're listening from. The air conditioning in the Teleantioquia studios roared that afternoon of March 15th, 1987, trying to counteract the stifling heat seeping in from the streets of Medellin. Valentina Restrepo adjusted her lapel mic as she mentally reviewed the topics for that day's episode of Afternoons of Glamour, the most popular variety show in the region. At just 25, Valentina was already the most recognized figure on Antioquian television. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and charming smile had captivated thousands of viewers. 30 seconds ago live, shouted the director from booth, his voice echoing through the studio. The lights brightened, creating the warm and familiar atmosphere the show was known for. Valentina took a deep breath, as she did before every broadcast, and straightened up on the velvet-covered chair. Everything felt like a regular show. She interviewed an up-and-coming designer from Bogota, discussed the latest makeup trends, and introduced a feature on local tourist destinations. But everything changed when she reached the social news segment, where she usually commented on the week's standout events. And now, dear viewers, Valentina said with her usual smile, staring directly into main camera, we're going to talk about a topic that has the whole country talking. It was obvious she was referring to a well-known figure in the region who had been dominating national headlines. That figure, of course, was Pablo Escobar. Back then, his name was on everyone's lips. Just 4 months earlier, in November 1986, he had been elected as a substitute member of the House of Representatives through the liberal alternative movement, sparking national controversy. The media couldn't stop talking about him. Some praised his actions in Medellin's poorest neighborhoods, while others subtly criticized him for his alleged ties to drug trafficking. Valentina, meanwhile, had grown up in the exclusive El Poblado neighborhood, within one of Antioquia's oldest aristocratic families. Her father, Aurelio Restrepo, owned several textile companies, and her mother, Mercedes Landano, came from one of the most respected families in the city. Since childhood, Valentina had been raised under the traditional values of Antioquian high society, where those who rose to power through dishonorable means were looked down upon. It's incredible, Valentina said, playing with the golden pen in her fingers, how some people think money can buy respect or class, when we all know that true distinction isn't bought right. In the control room, Carlos Mejia, the director, felt a chill run down his spine. He knew all too well that in Medellin's media, there was a tacit rule. You didn't mention Pablo Escobar, let alone in a disparaging tone. It was an unwritten rule everyone followed to the letter. Valentina, Carlos whispered through the intercom, let's move on to the next segment. But Valentina either didn't hear the warning or chose to ignore it. She felt in control, secure behind the cameras, surrounded by lights and with the backing of her loyal audience. Several people from her social circle had recently expressed discomfort over the rising influence of wealthy individuals from questionable backgrounds, and she thought it was time to share her opinion. Look, she said, leaning toward the camera in a more confidential tone, I come from a family that has built its name through generations of hard work. My grandfather started his company from nothing, but always with integrity, and I believe that's what truly matters in our society. She paused deliberately, as she had learned in her theater classes, and continued, because having money isn't the same as having class. You can buy giant houses, expensive cars, and even jewelry for beautiful women, but true refinement, culture, good taste, that can't be bought with bundles of stained bills. The reference was obvious to anyone familiar with Medellin's social commentary. Stained bills was a common phrase used to describe drug money. In the booth, Carlos ran his hands over his head. He knew a very dangerous line was being crossed. And no matter how much certain individuals try to blend in with the elite of our city, Valentina continued with growing confidence. We can always tell the difference between a real gentleman and someone who's just pretending. Her words hung in the air like a sentence. Jesus Montoya, the chief cameraman with over 15 years of TV experience, felt his throat go dry. He had seen enough violence in the city to know that certain words could cost lives. Because at the end of the day, Valentina said, raising her voice with a smile that was meant to be charming but sounded increasingly defiant, a criminal is still a criminal, no matter how many millions he has or how many properties he owns. True nobility cannot be faked. Dear viewers, the silence that followed was overwhelming. In the booth, Carlos's face had gone pale. The technicians exchanged alarmed looks. Everyone understood that what they had just witnessed could have serious consequences. Valentina, on the other hand, seemed completely unaware of the tension she had unleashed. She carried on with her bright expression, moving on to the next topic as if nothing had happened. She spoke about local beauty contest, introduced a commercial for an exclusive boutique, and ended the show with her signature farewell. Remember, dear viewers, true beauty comes from the soul, and the soul cannot be bought with money. See you tomorrow on Afternoons of Glamour. When the camera is shut off, an awkward silence settled over the studio. The technicians packed up quietly, avoiding eye contact. Carlos hurried out of the control room, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning still running. "Valentina," he called out with an uneasy voice. "We need to talk." But she had already risen from her seat, calmly placing her notes into a finely crafted Italian leather handbag. "Great show today, Carlos. I think we're going to break audience records." "Valentina, do you realize what you said on camera?" he asked with clear concern. She stopped in her tracks, her face showing genuine confusion. "What do you mean?" "I simply share my view on the importance of traditional values in our society. Isn't that what we always talk about on the show?" Carlos stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You just called Pablo Escobar a criminal on national television. Do you understand how serious that is?" For the first time since the broadcast began, Valentina showed a hint of doubt. Her expression clouded briefly with unease, but she quickly replaced it with a forced laugh. "Oh, Carlos, don't exaggerate. I never mentioned his name. I just made a general comment about the difference between decent people and those who only pretend to be." Then, raising her chin, she added, "Besides, we live in a democracy. We're still supposed to have freedom of speech, aren't we?" Carlos looked at her with a mixture of shock and pity. He had spent years in the media and knew that in Colombia, especially in Medellin in 1987, freedom of speech had very clear limits. And Valentina had just crossed the most dangerous of them all. "Listen carefully," he said, grabbing her arm. "You're going to go home. You're going to stay quiet for the next few days, and we'll hope nothing comes of this. Understood?" Valentina pulled her arm away with disdain. "Carlos, you're overreacting. I'm a well-known public figure in this city. I come from a respected family. No one's going to dare do anything to me over a simple TV comment." Those were the last words Carlos ever heard from Valentina Restrepo that day. He watched her walk away from the set with firm, elegant steps, her golden hair illuminated by the hallway lights, completely unaware that she had just signed a sentence that would forever alter her fate. What Valentina didn't know was that Afternoons of Glamour wasn't just watched in Medellin. It was also broadcast in several other cities in the department, including Puerto Triunfo, home of the infamous Hacienda Napoles. And that very afternoon, as Valentina mocked so-called criminals with delusions of grandeur, Pablo Escobar was in the main living room of his estate, resting after a busy day, reviewing his business numbers. When he heard the model's words, the most feared and powerful man in Colombia simply smiled. But it wasn't just any smile. It was the cold, calculated one that those under his command knew all too well. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he snapped his fingers once. Popeye, his closest lieutenant, who had been reviewing documents at a nearby table, came over immediately. "Yes, Patron. Did you hear her?" "Yes, I heard her," Pablo replied, leaning back calmly in his leather chair, still wearing that unsettling smile. "I want you to find everything on that woman, where she lives, who she knows, what her habits are. Everything. And then, boss..." Pablo Escobar stood up slowly. He walked to a window overlooking his private zoo, where hippos bathed peacefully in the artificial lake, and spoke the words that would seal Valentina Restrepo's fate. Then we're going to show that young lady the difference between having elegance and having power. On Saturdays, she usually goes to the country club with her friends. As for her love life, she doesn't have a steady partner, Patron. But for the past 3 months, she's been seeing Rodrigo Mejiarcilla, the son of the owner of Cementos Argos. He lives in Bogota, though he travels to Medellin every 2 weeks, he added. Pablo leaned back in his seat, absorbing all the information. He knew the traditional families of Antioquia far too well. Since his rise in public life, he had tried to integrate into that world, but they had always kept him at arm's length with that cold courtesy so typical of the Paisa elite. To them, Pablo was nothing more than the son of a peasant from Rio Negro who had made a fortune through shady dealings. "Do you know what really bothers me, Popeye?" he said, standing up and walking toward the window that overlooked the zoo. "It's not that I'm offended. Insults roll off me like water off a duck's back." He stopped by the large window, watching a group of pink flamingos walk gracefully along the edge of the artificial lake. "What outrages me is the hypocrisy," he continued. "These people think they're spotless, untouchable. But where do they think their ancestors' money came from? What's the true origin of the Restrepo family's wealth?" Popeye knew the question didn't require an answer, but he replied anyway. "I couldn't say for sure. Patron smuggling?" Pablo turned to look at him. "Valentina's great-grandfather, Emilio Restrepo, made his fortune smuggling whiskey and cigarettes from Panama back in the 1920s. He laundered that money by investing in the textile industry. But of course, that part gets forgotten, doesn't it?" He returned to the table and reopened the file, this time stopping at a particular photograph. In it, Valentina was posing at a charity gala, surrounded by the most influential women of Antiochian society. "And now I'm the criminal," he muttered. "I, who built football fields in the poorest neighborhoods. I, who created jobs for thousands. I, who've helped so many families in this city." Pablo's voice took on a darker, heavier tone. Popeye recognized it instantly. It was the same one he always used before making an irreversible decision. "What do you want me to do, Patron?" Pablo closed the folder once more and walked over to the telephone on a side table. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Carlos Mejia, director of Tards del Amor," he said when someone answered. "Yes, I'll wait." Popeye watched silently as his boss waited for the call to go through. He knew that what was about to happen would affect not only Valentina, but could have far greater repercussions. "Mr. Mejia, this is Pablo Escobar," he said when the call connected. "Yes, that Pablo Escobar. The same one your presenter commented on yesterday on the show." Pablo began walking toward the window as he spoke, the telephone cord trailing behind him. "No, don't worry, Mr. Mejia. I'm not angry. On the contrary, I want to congratulate you. It's admirable that you have someone on your team with such bravery. It's commendable that someone dares to speak their mind with such conviction." On the other end, Mejia's voice trembled, but Pablo continued with that polite yet menacing tone, more unsettling than a scream. "Look, Mr. Mejia, I like Miss Restrepo's style so much that I'd love to meet her in person. Yes, meet her. I have a job offer that might interest her." The line went silent for a few seconds. "Yes, a job offer. I'm considering launching my own TV channel, and I think someone with Miss Restrepo's talent would be a perfect fit for the project." He paused to let his words sink in. "Of course, I understand she may have current commitments, but I'd like you to pass on my invitation. Tell her that Pablo Escobar is inviting her to lunch at Hacienda Napoles next Saturday at noon." The murmurs on the other end were barely audible, but Pablo didn't let them disrupt his speech. "Oh, and Mr. Mejia, please make sure she understands. This isn't just an invitation. It's a unique opportunity, and those don't come twice. Do you understand?" Yes, Mr. Escobar," Carlos managed to say. "Perfect. I expect your confirmation by Friday. Have an excellent day, Mr. Mejia." He hung up the receiver and looked out at the garden, where a group of workers was feeding the hippos. Those imposing African animals were one of his most treasured whims. For specimens he had brought directly from a zoo in the United States. The hippos appeared calm, even friendly, but Pablo knew, well, they were among the most lethal creatures on the planet. With a single bite, They could tear a man in two. Patron, Popeye said, do you think she'll accept? Pablo smiled with that icy expression that had only grown more powerful over the years. She'll come, Popeye. If not willingly, then by force. He walked over to his desk and picked up a sheet of gold-embossed stationery from Hacienda Napoles. With his refined handwriting, he wrote a personal note. Miss Valentina Restrepo, I have followed your career in television with interest and deeply admire your determination in expressing such direct views on Paisa society. I would be delighted to meet you personally to discuss a proposal that could be highly beneficial for your career and my business ventures. I look forward to meeting you on Saturday, March 21st at 12, noon at Hacienda Napoles for an informal lunch. My helicopter can pick you up at any location you prefer. Cordially, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. He folded the letter with precision and handed it to Popeye. Make sure someone delivers it to her apartment today. Yes, Patron. And make sure it's someone she'll recognize. Someone who makes it perfectly clear who's sending the invitation. As Popeye walked out of the dining room with the envelope, Pablo returned to the window. The hippos had finished eating and were calmly submerging into the warm waters of the artificial lake. Very soon, Valentina Restrepo would learn that in Colombia, there were unbreakable rules, and he himself would teach them to her. At the Teleantioquia offices, Carlos Mejia hung up the phone with trembling fingers. He knew he had to contact Valentina immediately, but he also understood that a single wrong word could make things worse. Pablo Escobar was not a man of idle threats, and that call had sounded more like a court order than an invitation. He considered calling Valentina's parents, or even police, but quickly dismissed both ideas. In 1987 Medellin, there were situations beyond the authorities' reach and men who simply could not be confronted. All he could do was pray that Valentina had the wisdom to accept the invitation and the prudence to apologize for her words. Because if she didn't, Carlos feared he might never see her again. Dear friends, this story is just beginning, and Valentina has no idea of the danger looming ahead. If this tale of power and consequences in 1980s Colombia is captivating you as much as it is me while telling it, it would be an honor to have you join this community by subscribing to the channel. Your support is essential to continue sharing these stories that help us better understand our past. Give this video a like if you want to see which path Valentina will take in response to the invitation that could change her fate completely. Now, let's see how our protagonist reacts upon receiving Pablo Escobar's letter. Valentina Restrepo's apartment in the Laureles neighborhood reflected the sober elegance so typical of traditional Antioquian families. Located on the 12th floor of an exclusive building, offer a privileged view of the city, with the mountains embracing Medellin in the distance. That afternoon, March 16th, as the sun set behind the hills, Valentina was in her private study reviewing the scripts for the next day's show. The doorbell interrupted her concentration. She looked at the wall clock. It was 6:45. She wasn't expecting visitors. Her maid, Carmen, had already left, and Rodrigo wouldn't be arriving from Bogota until the weekend. Who is it? She asked through the intercom. Good evening, Miss Restrepo. I have a letter for you, replied a polite but firm voice. Valentina went to a window overlooking the street. A black Mercedes-Benz was parked right in front of the building. A man in a dark suit stood beside the vehicle. Who's it from? It's personal, miss. I must deliver it by hand. Something in the man's tone sent a chill down Valentina's spine. She went down to the building lobby, where Don Edilberto, the doorman, was waiting with a worried look. Miss Valentina, he whispered, that man says he's here on behalf of Pablo Escobar. The words hit her like a slap. Her knees buckled, and she had to lean on the marble counter to keep from collapsing. Are you absolutely sure? Yes, miss. He told me to tell you exactly that. He comes in the name of Mr. Pablo Escobar. Valentina took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. Her mind raced, linking what she had said on yesterday's show with this unexpected visit. Tell him to wait a moment, she managed to say. She rushed back up to her apartment and went straight to the phone. She dialed Carlos Mejia's number. Carlos, it's Valentina. Something strange happened after yesterday's broadcast. On the other end, There was an awkward silence. Valentina, we need to talk urgently. Carlos, there's a man in the building who says he was sent by Pablo Escobar. This is about what I said yesterday, isn't it? Listen closely, Carlos replied. Escobar called me this morning. He wants to have lunch with you at Hacienda Napoles this Saturday. The phone nearly slipped from her hands. What do you mean he wants to have lunch with me? It's not an invitation, Valentina. It's practically an order. The weight of the situation began to crush her, like a slab of concrete on her chest. Her words from the previous day, which had seemed so harmless at the time, had reached the ears of the most feared man in the country. Carlos, what am I supposed to do? You're going to go down, accept that letter with a smile, and say yes. There's no other option, Valentina. She hung up slowly and looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her face was distorted, and for the first time in years, her makeup could not conceal the fear in her eyes. She descended once again to the lobby, where the messenger awaited her with a serene but analytical expression. He was a man in his 40s, soberly dressed, with the demeanor of someone used to handling delicate matters. Miss Restrepo, he said as he handed her a thick envelope embossed with the golden seal of Hacienda Napoles. Mr. Escobar instructed me to deliver this to you in person. Valentina took the envelope, trying to control the trembling in her hands. Thank you. He also asked me to remind you that he expects a response before Friday. The man gave a slight bow, like a butler from an old movie, and walked toward the exit. Valentina watched him get into a Mercedes-Benz and disappear down Nudabar Avenue. Back home, Valentina poured herself a glass of white wine before daring to open the letter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper. Pablo Escobar's handwriting was surprisingly elegant, almost artistic. She remembered he had studied at the school in Zipaquirá, the same one where Gabriel Garcia Marquez had been educated. That man knew how to write. She read the letter 3 times before the phrase began to take full meaning, a proposal that could benefit both your career and my business interests. The line sounded as seductive as it was unsettling. She dialed her parents' house. Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. What's wrong, honey? You sound upset. Can you come to my apartment? It's very important. 40 minutes later, Aurelio Restrepo was seated on the leather couch, holding Pablo Escobar's letter with a worried look on his face. At 62, Aurelio had enough experience to grasp the gravity of the situation. Valentina, he said after a long silence, what exactly did you say on the show? She repeated her comments from the day before, word for word. As she spoke, she saw her father's expression grow darker and darker. My God, Valentina, do you realize how serious this is? Dad, I just share my opinion. I didn't mention any names. Aurelio got up from the couch and walked to the window. He looked at the city lights slowly turning on in the dark. Daughter, in this country, there are things you can say and things you can't. And there are people you simply don't play with. So, what do you suggest? He returned to the couch, took her hands firmly, and looked her in the eyes. Are you thinking of turning down the meeting? Going? Are you joking? Not a chance. Listen carefully, Valentina. Pablo Escobar is not just any criminal. He's a man with influence, power, and unlimited resources. If you choose not to go, the consequences could be worse. But, Dad, what if it's a trap? That's too big a risk. Not going is riskier. You're going to go, you'll be polite, apologize if necessary, smile the way you know how, and get out of there without making trouble. He paused, weighing whether to share what he was thinking. Then he added, I've heard that Escobar is shrewd. He appreciates culture education. If you treat him with respect, it's likely everything will go well. And if it doesn't, Aurelio didn't respond right away. He knew perfectly well there were risks, but he also understood that ignoring the invitation could be fatal. Let's trust, he finally said, that he behaves like a man of class. That night, Valentina couldn't sleep. She stayed awake past 3 a.m., pacing her apartment, carefully considering every possible way out. She could flee Medellin, go to Bogota with Rodrigo, or even leave the country. but she knew that would only complicate things further. Pablo Escobar's influence was vast. His network of contacts spread across every corner of the country. She also considered going to the police, but dismissed the idea immediately. What could she tell them? That she'd been invited to lunch? Technically, there was nothing illegal about it. At first light, she made a decision. She dialed Carlos Mejia's number as soon as it was a decent hour. "Carlos, I'm going to accept the invitation." "Thank God, Valentina. I think that's the smartest choice." "How do I let him know?" "Leave that to me. Escobar asked me to handle it." "Carlos, do you think I'll be okay?" A long silence followed on the other end of the line. "Valentina, go with humility. Don't go as a celebrity everyone in the country knows. Go as someone who made a mistake and wants to make amends." That same morning, Carlos contacted Hacienda Napoles. Escobar's secretary took the message and confirmed that the Patron had received a positive response with pleasure. Saturday at noon, the woman confirmed. A helicopter will pick her up from the Intercontinental Hotel's helipad at 11:30. In the following days, Valentina tried to act normal. She continued hosting her show Tards de l'Amour, though she was much more cautious with her on-air comments. Her colleagues noticed she was quieter, more tense, but she attributed it to work fatigue. On Friday night, she stayed at her parent house, as was customary. Her mother, Mercedes, noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Valentina, you look so pale. Are you sick?" Valentina and Aurelio exchanged a glance. They had agreed not to tell Mercedes anything to avoid worrying her. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a bit tired." But Mercedes knew her daughter better than anyone. "Are you sure? You look like you're carrying a heavy burden." "I promise, Mom. I just need to rest a bit this weekend." Before going to bed, Valentina wrote a letter. It was a precaution in case something went wrong, in case she didn't return from Hacienda Napoles. In it, she explained in detail everything that had happened. Her TV remarks, the unexpected invitation from Escobar, and her decision to accept. She sealed the letter and placed it in her desk drawer, next to a copy of her will. Saturday dawned with a clear sky. Valentina woke up at 7, even though she'd set the alarm for 8. Her nerves and insomnia wouldn't let her sleep any longer. She showered, got ready meticulously, and chose her outfit with great care. She settled on a navy blue dress, modest, elegant, but not attention-grabbing. Mid-heel shoes and discreet makeup. She wanted to project the image of a respectful woman, a well-educated young lady from a good family. At exactly 11 o'clock, she called a taxi to take her to the Intercontinental Hotel. During the ride, she observed the streets of Medellin as if it were the last time she would see them. The street vendors at traffic lights, families on their way to church, children playing soccer on the fields. Everything seemed more vivid, more tangible. On the hotel rooftop, a pilot awaited beside a white and gold-painted helicopter. The man was formally dressed and courteous. "Miss Restrepo, I'm Captain Herrera. Are you ready for your flight to Hacienda Napoles?" Valentina nodded without saying a word, unable to trust her voice not to betray her. As the helicopter lifted off, she watched her city shrink beneath her, like a model set. In that moment, she understood her life, as she had known it, had reached a point of no return. Regardless of what happened at the hacienda, she knew nothing would ever be the same again. If you also feel that tension as we narrate Valentina's journey into the unknown, and this story about power and its consequences has you hooked, we'd love to invite you to join our community by subscribing. Every like and every comment gives us the strength to keep sharing these stories that help us understand our past. Tell us your opinion. Do you think Valentina did the right thing by accepting the meeting? And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. The face-to-face encounter between Valentina and the most powerful man in Colombia. The helicopter flew over the dense vegetation of the Middle Magdalena region for about 45 minutes until Hacienda Napoles came into view, an oasis of opulence in the heart of the jungle. From above, Valentina could see the scale of the estate. Thousands of hectares stretching to the horizon, with artificial lakes reflecting the sun like mirrors. "There's the zoo, miss," the pilot shouted over the roar of the blades, pointing to an area where large animals roamed freely across the fields. Valentina's stomach tightened. not just from the motion of the aircraft, but from the awareness of where she was going. This was no casual social meeting. She was about to come face to face with the most feared and influential man in the country. The helicopter touched down gently on a paved landing strip beside the main residence, a majestic Spanish colonial-style building surrounded by impeccably landscaped gardens. Several men in dark suits waited by the helipad. Valentina immediately noticed they all had radios on their belts and that their jackets seemed to hide more than just wallets. One man approached the helicopter as soon as the blade stopped spinning. He was tall, thin, with a defined mustache and a smile that never reached his eyes. Miss Restrepo, welcome to Hacienda Napoles. I'm John Jairo Velasquez, but you can call me Popeye. The patron is expecting you. Valentina stepped out of the helicopter on trembling legs, doing her best to maintain the poise and confidence she had honed after years in front of the camera. She held a small leather purse and a box of fine chocolates she had bought in Medellin as a courtesy gift. "Thank you very much for receiving me," she said, forcing a smile she hoped looked more natural than it felt. Popeye led her along a cobbled path to the main house. As they walked, Valentina could more clearly appreciate the scope of the estate. The gardens were dazzling, marble fountains, animal sculptures, and abundance of exotic flowers filling the air with tropical scents. In the distance, she spotted a group of pink flamingos walking gracefully near a lake. "The patron is very excited to meet you," Popeye said as they climbed a marble staircase leading to the grand entrance. "He rarely invites television figures to share a meal." The front door was carved and inlaid with gold, a clear sign of the owner's wealth. A uniformed butler opened it and guided them through a foyer straight out of period film. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of Colombian landscapes, and a curved staircase leading to the second floor. "This way, miss," said the butler, directing her into a room that looked like a library. The space was breathtaking. The walls were covered in bookshelves reaching all the way to the ceiling, with a sliding ladder to reach the highest books. Leather armchairs, a marble fireplace, and wide windows offered a direct view of the private zoo. "Mr. Escobar will be with you in a few minutes," the butler announced before slipping out silently. Valentina was left alone, her heart beating so hard she feared it could be heard throughout the room. She walked over to the bookshelves, trying to calm herself. The collection was astonishing. Universal classics, Colombian history, biographies of international leaders, and economic treaties. It was definitely not the kind of library she had imagined in a drug lord's home. "I see you're interested in books," said a deep voice behind her. Valentina turned around immediately and found herself face to face with Pablo Escobar. He was shorter than she had imagined, but his presence filled the room. He wore white linen trousers and a light blue polo shirt. Simple clothes, but of obviously high quality. His face was round, with small but penetrating eyes that gave the impression of perceiving more than they should. "Mr. Escobar," Valentina said, giving a slight nod of her head. "Thank you for receiving me in your beautiful estate." Pablo smiled, and for a moment, he seemed like a completely normal host. "Please call me Pablo." "The pleasure is mine, Miss Restrepo. I've seen your show several times. You have a natural gift in front of the camera." He approached her with a firm and confident stride. "Would you like to visit the zoo before lunch? There are some animals you might find interesting." Valentina nodded, still not daring to speak. Pablo offered his arm like a traditional gentleman, and together they walked out into the gardens. The zoo tour felt like something out of a strange dream. Pablo showed her his African elephants, giraffes, zebras, and spoke about each species with the enthusiasm of a passionate collector. He was courteous, charming, almost paternal, as he described the unique traits of each animal. "These are my favorites," he said as they reached the lake where the hippos rested. "I brought them directly from Africa. Did you know hippos are the most dangerous animals on the continent? They kill more people per year than lions or crocodiles." Valentina watched the enormous creatures resting in the murky water. There was something almost hypnotic in their movement. Slow and peaceful, yet their size made their destructive strength obvious. "They're impressive," she murmured, though she didn't miss the implication behind Pablo's comment. "Yes," he said, locking eyes with her. "Beautiful and deadly, Like many things in life, wouldn't you agree? They returned to house for lunch, which was served in an elegant dining room overlooking the garden. The table was set for two, with linen tablecloths, crystal glasses, and fresh flowers decorating the center. A service team brought a meal worthy of a fine dining restaurant. Antioquian sancocho, snapper and passion fruit sauce, coconut rice, fried plantains, and a variety of tropical fruits. During the first part of the meal, the conversation was surprisingly ordinary. Pablo asked about her career, her family, and her future plans. He was a skilled conversationalist who knew how to listen and asked intelligent questions. Valentina slowly began to relax, thinking perhaps her fears had been exaggerated. "You know something?" Pablo said as he delicately cut a piece of fish. "I deeply admire those who have the courage to express their thoughts in public. In this country, not everyone dares to do that." That was the moment Valentina had been dreading all week. "Pablo," she said, correcting herself after nearly saying Mr. Escobar, "I want to take this opportunity to apologize. If at any point something I said on my show offended you, it was never my intention." Pablo raised his hand gently, interrupting her without rudeness. "You don't have to apologize, Miss Restrepo. I very much enjoyed your show last Tuesday, especially the part where you spoke about the difference between having money and having true elegance." He took a sip of red wine before continuing. "You know I come from poverty. My father was a farmer, and my mother taught in a rural school. Since I was a boy, I understood that in this world there are two kinds of people, those who are born with advantages and those who have to fight their way through." His tone remained calm, but Valentina noticed a barely perceptible shift in his voice. "For years I tried to earn the respect of Antioquian society through legal means. I donated money to education. I built sports fields in the poorest neighborhoods. I supported housing projects. But they always saw me as the outsider, the man who had made his fortune through questionable means." Pablo leaned back calmly in his chair, keeping his gaze fixed on her. "You mentioned criminals with pretensions. Tell me, Miss Restrepo, is someone a criminal simply for being born without resources? For having to find opportunities where others don't even look?" Valentina felt her throat go dry. "Pablo, I never meant to. Or is he a criminal simply for not following the rules imposed by families like yours?" he interrupted, ignoring her. "Families who built their wealth through smuggling and favoritism decades ago, and now believe they have the moral authority to point fingers at those still struggling to get ahead." The silence that followed was heavy. Valentina could hear her own heartbeat, and in the distance, the muffled sounds of the zoo. "You know what saddens me most, Miss Restrepo?" Pablo asked, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That a woman so intelligent, so educated, so beautiful, has such a limited mind." He stood slowly and walked over the window, overlooking the Hippo Lake. "I've made a decision. I want to offer you a job, a serious proposal. I want you to be the main face of my new television network. I'll pay you 3 times what you earn at Teleantioquia. You'll have a prime-time show and reach all Colombia." Valentina looked at him, incredulous. "A television network?" "That's right. I plan to acquire several regional channels and found the first national private network. It's going to be revolutionary, something that changes the way television is made in this country." Pablo returned to the table and sat across from her again. "But there's one condition," he added. "Your first program must be a public apology for what you said last Tuesday. You'll have to explain that you were mistaken, that you spoke without understanding, and that now you see the difference between a criminal and a visionary who creates opportunities, like me." Valentina felt the floor drop out from under her. "Pablo, I can't do that." "Can't?" he asked, leaning toward her. "Or won't? It's just that my reputation, my family, my career—" He stood again, this time more forcefully. "Your good image, Miss Restrepo, now depends entirely on me. Your family as well. And as for your career," he paused as if weighing each word, "let's just say that in this country, building a successful television career is complicated without my backing." He walked to a desk at the back of the dining room and returned with a beige folder. He placed it in front of her and opened it. Inside were photographs, images of Valentina leaving her home, entering the studios, dining with her parents, kissing Rodrigo at the country club. There were also copies of her father's company's financial documents, bank statements, and even photos of her house in El Poblado. It's very easy to know everything about someone, Pablo said with that chilling smile that was beginning to terrify her. Your habits, your loved ones, they're all right here. He picked up one photo, Rodrigo leaving El Dorado Airport. Your boyfriend, Rodrigo Mejia Arcila. He arrives every Friday on the 5:40 p.m. flight to Medellin. Stays at the Dan Carlton when he doesn't spend the night at your apartment. Leaves Sunday evenings on the 7 p.m. flight to Bogota. Valentina felt tears threatening to escape, but she forced herself to remain calm. What exactly do you expect from me? Pablo closed the folder carefully and sat down again. I just want you to understand that in this country there are rules. Rules that cannot be broken without consequences. You broke one last Tuesday. And what's the punishment? Your punishment, Pablo said, pouring himself more wine, depends entirely on you. You can accept my offer, apologize publicly, and continue your life. Or you can maintain your haughty attitude and find out just how far the power of your last name can take you. Valentina stood up, her legs trembling. Can I think about it? Of course. Pablo replied with a smile that seemed kind. You have until Monday to decide. Popeye will escort you back to Medellin. He approached her and offered his hand like a gentleman. It's been a real pleasure meeting you, Miss Restrepo. I hope we'll be working together soon. She shook his hand, feeling the strength behind that polite gesture. One last thing, Pablo added as he walked her to the exit. I've decided to give you a memento of this visit. He snapped his fingers, and an employee appeared with a luxurious box. It's a piece of jewelry I had made just for you, he said, opening the box. Inside was a gold necklace with a pendant in the shape of a hippo, decorated with tiny diamonds. As I mentioned, hippos are beautiful but deadly creatures. I want you to remember every time you wear it that beauty and danger often go hand in hand. Valentina accepted the gift with trembling hands, clearly understanding the message. The return helicopter flight was a blur. She watched Hacienda Napoles disappear into the clouds, but knew she would never be able to leave behind what had happened there. When she landed in Medellin, she was no longer the same woman who had left that morning. Pablo Escobar had achieved what he wanted, to break the resolve of a high society woman who had dared to challenge him. That night, alone in her apartment, Valentina looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. In her hands, she held the hippo necklace. For the first time, she truly understood the meaning of power. It wasn't the power of inherited money or a prestigious name. It was the power of fear, of being able to change the course of someone's life with a single word, to turn a confident person into a fearful shadow in a matter of hours. Monday morning, Valentina called Carlos Mejia. Carlos, I've decided to accept Mr. Escobar's offer. 3 weeks later, Valentina Restrepo appeared on a national broadcast, tears in her eyes, the necklace gleaming on her neck. She publicly apologized for her comments, calling them rushed and ignorant, and praised a visionary businessman who had been misunderstood by society. Over 8 million Colombians watched that broadcast. Valentina never mentioned Pablo Escobar in public again, but she was never the same woman. Fear had settled inside her like a permanent guest, reminding her daily that she had met the man who could destroy lives as easily as he fed his wild animals. Once again, Pablo Escobar proved that in Colombia, he was the one who made the rules, and those who dared challenge him quickly learned their place. This story invites us to reflect on the true face of power and its consequences. Do you think Escobar acted like a businessman defending his name, or like the criminal so many accuse him of being? If you had been in Valentina's shoes, would you have accepted the humiliation to protect your life? And if you had been Pablo, could you have forgiven the insult? Or would you also have sought respect through fear? These are difficult questions. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of this real episode from 1980s Colombia. If this story about power, survival, and extreme choices moved you as much as it moved me to tell it, I invite you to join our community. Your support is essential to keep sharing these stories that help us understand how the past continues to shape our present. What do you think of Valentina's fate? Do you think she made the right choice, or did she have another option? Leave us your comment. Share this story if you believe more people should hear it. and activate notifications so you won't miss the next stories that reveal the darkest and most fascinating secrets of our history. Because in the end, these are not just stories from the past. They are living lessons to understand the world we live in today.